Welcome to the Edifice Complex, the property design and development podcast. Let your hosts Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean keep you up with who is innovating and doing great work, perspective on the adjacent possible, and challenges to the status quo.
Welcome to the show, Edifice Complex. I'm Robert Bean, your co-host and unofficial mediator, here with my colleague, official agitator, heavy emphasis on agitator, friend and Yoda, most everything to do with buildings, Mr. Adam Muggleton. Say hello, sir, Yoda.
Hello there. So today, good one today. We are so international, right? We are all over the world. We're down. So today, our guest comes from Melbourne. The reason I zeroed in on our guest today is because I followed his YouTube channel, like a crazy ex-girlfriend does. And he made a very interesting comment about the state of the art of BMS and where it's all going and where it's going wrong. So that's one of the reasons we're here. He's also a super interesting guy and a man of international mystery. That's the other reason we're here. So
that's right. Our guest today has a career that's journeyed through South Africa, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and a good chunk of that time with no other than Johnson Controls. He's worn several hats, including commissioning engineer, design engineer, project manager, and controls consultant. Since 2017, he's been an independent building automation consultant through his company Lifecycle Controls. Welcome to the show, Bryce Anderson.
Hello. Great to be on board, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bryce, after studying electronic engineering and making your way through the British Empire, country by country, solving BMS problems, building by building, you had an epiphany, which was interesting to me. You realized that you could have a bigger impact by moving away, by solving the BMS systems in every building on the continent, and started working with the BMS companies themselves. And I find that to be really interesting. Switching gears in a business plan midway through a business plan is always a scary thing. You managed to say, okay, let's do this. Let's switch it up. That's not everybody's cup of tea. Tell our listeners how you got to where you were and what made you change your mind.
Yeah, sure. I guess I've had a unique career, and I've been quite lucky in a few situations. I'll just sort of step you through a few things here. So obviously born and raised in South Africa and started in the BMS industry in sort of 1998, doing BMS commissioning for a couple of years. In South Africa, the only way out of South Africa sort of is to get a working holiday visa in the UK. So when I was 26, it's like, if I don't do something now, I'm not about to get out of here. So when I was 26, I went off to got my 2-year working holiday visa, went to London. I ended up staying there for 9 years. And in those 9 years, I worked through being a BMS commissioning technician, a service technician, a BMS service small projects engineer, BMS design engineer. So I've sort of had this first unique thing where I've been jumping backwards and forwards between the construction department and the service department through my career. And often with the same companies. I've been on work permits for, the first sort of 15 years of my career. I was on different types of work permits. And that's quite a unique thing because I think it's rare that BMS people will come from the construction department and then into service, or from service into construction. They're two very isolated things. So I think my first thing to help me is having a good understanding of, how to install this thing and how to maintain it. So when I was a design engineer, I'd often try and incorporate, like, I'm designing this thing, how am I going to maintain it for 20 years? Try to keep those sensors at eye level and reduce getting up ladders and sort of thing. So I had that sort of first unique thing. And then I wanted to come to Australia. So in 2010, I came to Australia. Interesting story. I was in London and we just got our British passports for the family. I got the British passport, South African passport. You're gone. Backup plan was sorted out. So I started trying to come to Australia, and I had a couple of interviews, and I had an interview on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night with Johnson Controls. And the last question they sort of said to me was, look, we want to meet you face to face. And I was like, who's paying for that? So Johnson's paid for me to have a 3-day interview from Melbourne to from London to Melbourne. I flew over, flights, accommodation, car hire, everything for 3 days. And the third day they said, look, we really like you. Why don't you come and work for us? And your first task, your first deliverable as a project manager is to be back here working in 6 weeks. And, they paid for shipping containers, flights, visas, 3 months accommodation, a completely paid for relocation. And that's how I got into Australia. So I worked for them for about 4 years as a BMS project manager. and designer. And so that took me up to about 2014. But that's when I was sort of like, after 15 years of working in construction, like that will wear anybody down, right? After 15 years in 3 regions, I was like, man, I don't want to do it like this anymore, because I had got to a point where I just figured that no matter how well you project manage the delivery and reduce these risks and how well you design the BMS, you still wouldn't have a good outcome, because all the other stakeholders, your customer, the mechanical contractor, and their customer, the head contractor, they don't have a long-term investment in the building. They're out in 2 or 3 years. They're not there for 20 years. And that used to cause me big problems, because my customer and their customer just wanted to maximize their revenue, or more like, reduce their losses over a 2 or 3 year time period, get out, unscathed, and didn't care at all about 20 years. That was frustrating me to death. So I wanted to sort of move up the food chain and try and get out of the BMS contracting. So here in Melbourne, there's a tier 1 all services consultancy called Norman Disney and Young. There's like 100 engineers in the Melbourne office: mechanical, electrical, fire, hydraulics, security, acoustics, sustainability, the whole thing. And they had a vacancy for an independent commissioning agent. And I went for this interview. I didn't want to really be an independent commissioning agent. And the person that was interviewing me was one of the directors, one of the owners. And I'd done some like stalking, and I'd sort of learned about his background. And he actually knew like some of the companies I worked with in London. I had an angle, right? And I basically, in the middle of the interview, I pitched to him that it'd be much better off if he gave me a job as a BMS consultant to work in their office and sort of like cover up on all this stuff. And he liked the idea. And they created a role that didn't exist in the Melbourne office. There were some BMS consultants in Sydney, but not in Melbourne. So I had this sort of 3-year best job in the world, because consulting is pretty easy compared to contracting. Consultant, you sort of... Consulting, you've got to get the concept right. The concept's got to be right, but it doesn't have to be quite right. The contractors will make the thing work, right? So it was a great job, And these mechanical engineers used to always complain about how busy they are. And I'm like, you don't know what busy is. Like, you know what I mean? Like, building the thing is hard, right? So from 2014, when I started doing BMS consulting, that's when everything changed for me, because now all of a sudden I had this visibility that no one else has. I was working on jobs with Honeywell, Siemens, Schneider, Johnson's, Ellerton, EasyIO, Distech, Tritium Niagara, Intertech, Automated Logic, like the whole thing, right? I'm just looking at all of this stuff and thinking, you know what? Everybody has the same problems. Everyone has the exact same problems. Because most people don't see that. Most people don't see the whole picture. Yeah. And I also now had like direct access to customers. Like, what do they want? What's actually causing them problems? And I started to realize that, BMS companies, we work very hard to build the BMS, maintain the BMS, and upgrade it. We completely focus on creating the thing, installing it, maintaining it, and upgrading it. But we don't actually use it to its maximum, capability. Like, we always stop short of producing something that's actually amazing. We just stop short all the time. So after 3 years of doing that, and it was great. I was like writing specifications on billion-dollar projects. Like, had exposure that like no one gets that exposure as a BMS person. And then at about 2017, I was thinking, I want to try and solve some of these problems. But when you work for a company, you've obviously got to earn money for them and, do follow the business model. I wanted to do like crazy things, you know what I mean? Like things that probably won't work. So then I resigned and started my own business. So from 2017 till now, I've just have living the dream, you know what I mean? Like this year, I'm earning almost no money this year because I've just sort of quit consulting and I'm focusing on investing my time in building actual solutions to problems, training courses, digital products, coaching and mentoring type stuff. When you work for a company, you can't say to your boss, hey, can I have a 6-month break? I'm going to go try and build this thing. They're like, no, you get your head down and you finish those jobs, right?
Be billable.
Right. Yes, I'm sort of, that's where I am right now. I'm just sort of working through how do we actually solve this problem? Because people don't try to solve problems. You know what I mean? I think we discussed once before, Adam, we get to the commissioning phase and the project manager is surprised that the commissioning got compressed from 3 months to 3 weeks. Like, oh my gosh, They just compress like, we know it's going to happen. Like, do something about it. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's my whole little journey. Like, had quite a few unique like opportunities along the way, but absolutely, like, after 15 years of working with BMS companies, I thought I was a hero. I was a good project manager. I was a good design engineer. I could write software code. I could build servers and commission BMS. I knew all that stuff. And I thought I was a hero. And I got into consulting. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, those things are not actually important. You know what I mean? Like, it's not important.
Everyone today.
So like, anyway, yeah. So let me just close the little window just popped up over here. But
do you know what, though? That was really interesting, something you just said. I'm living a dream. I haven't any money this year.
No, like, that's going to change. Like, make no mistake. Like, I'm investing some time now to build something that I will be rich, hopefully, one day. But the other key thing was, obviously, Robert, you sort of touched on something there in the intro, was that from 2017 or 2014, like every other BMS consultant, I was working for building owners, writing BMS specifications, doing specific upgrades, energy management systems, building analytics, like solving their problems. So a building owner or an FM, facility manager, look, Bryce, got a problem here. How do I restructure this maintenance contract to align with technology? How do I do that? Okay, let's work it out. So I was supporting building owners, facility managers, and also sub-consulting to mechanical consultants. So I'm client side of the fence, like everybody else. Mm-hmm. And just a couple of years ago, I was thinking, you know what, like, no one is helping the BMS companies. Like, a BMS company can't go to an independent person, give them $2,000 to solve a specific problem. They don't have those people to go to. There's no option for that. So like a year ago, as you're sort of touching on there, I sort of stepped over the fence, and I'm a BMS consultant providing, business to business consulting to BMS companies. And that's what I'm trying to build. But the stuff up was that it's a whole new customer. So I'm basically like starting a new business. I've got a different customer to attract and find solutions for. So other day I was here thinking like, I spent all this time creating this BMS consultancy serving building owners, and got to a point where basically I didn't do no marketing. Like, these building owners will come to me like every 2 weeks. Can you do a job? Can you do it? And I just like, no, yes, no. Oh, that's interesting. Yes, I'll do that. No. So that's what's been happening. Now I've got a whole new customer, BMS companies, who aren't used to having someone help them. So I've got this like interesting little challenge to build up this new little business with a different customer that has different pain points. But yeah, that's the short version of my story.
Just for our North American listeners, so BMS, Building Management System, outside of North America, there is a market outside North America, just saying, right? It's called BMS. It's
completely different, actually, in other parts of the world.
Agreed. But in North America, what you're talking about is the BAS, Building Automation Systems. So they're both the same thing, just for if anyone's wondering. Yeah. Okay, let's get into this. So BMS. I think sorry, man, go.
Yeah, I mean, what I love about this, in many ways, it's almost a parallel path to my own career. When I retired my engineering practice, we were doing. This is going back many years ago. Actually, another business that I had. When I sold that business, then it became about teaching other businesses what we had learned, and it really, we created our own role. We found a niche that needed to be resolved, and we created it. And from that point on, people came. It was, you build it, they will come type of stuff. But that takes kahunas. That takes ovaries and testicles to do that. It's not for everybody. And so, like, for our listeners, when you're like, for our students, for example, sitting in school wondering what the hell you're going to do with your life, there will come a time, as it came in your time, Bryce, where you have to realize, you know what, I'm traveling down this path, but there's something missing. And to be able to say, okay, I'm going to take a detour here and see where it goes. And then all of a sudden you discover a completely new business.
Yeah, like when I first went on my own, I know we sort of going down a rabbit hole here, but when I first went on my own, I was sort of like, I was just doing consulting work, and I wanted to earn some sort of passive income or whatever it was, and I remember thinking like, like in our industry, it's this and that, and this is the problems. But when you actually work for yourself, like, your eyes open up to opportunities. Like like every month I think of an amazing idea for a business. I write it down. Like, I mean, it's just so funny that when you work for a company and you're focused on project managing projects or designing projects, this is what you do, right? You're doing this job, you do it well, and you deal with problems. But when you have your own business, like, just your eyes open up to things you just never thought possible. Like when when you start doing different, you try this, oh, that didn't work, it didn't work, oh, that works great. So yeah, like it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
So BMS is a bit like commissioning, right? No one sort of is finishing their high school and thinking, I'm going to be a BMS engineer. So nobody ever, right? This is one of those jobs you sort of trip up and fall into, right? So there is a skill shortage and scarcity issue like no other, probably in BMS, right? Because you've got to understand building automation. You've got to understand building code. You've got to be pretty good on a keyboard. You've got to understand building systems and engineering. That's a pretty overlapping skill set. I mean, I can tell you, in the jurisdictions I work in, a good BMS engineer is really hard to find. What's that like where you are right now? What's the state of the market down there?
It's the same as that or worse in Australia. There used to be like, we can't find good people. That's what it used to be. Now we just can't find anybody. Like, we'll take anybody, you know what I mean? So we're not even looking for good people anymore. We're just looking for anybody.
Yeah.
The big issue we have in Australia is that I think that we're on about 10 years ahead of the rest of the world on this technology roadmap, energy efficiency, building ratings stuff, right?
Right.
And what that created was, so we're ahead of you by 10 years. I think my last video, actually I haven't published it yet. I'm publishing a video next week, which is, sorry, I got distracted there. But what it was is, sorry guys, I actually went down a different road for a second, then had to come back. The shortage of people. So what happened was, like, good BMS people in Australia have a lot of options to go work somewhere else. Yeah. And the technology industry, they draw their resource pool from the BMS industry. So if you're a half good person, technology companies will snap you up. And there's a new technology company coming along like every month. So a lot of good people are going to technology companies. Now in North America, let's say you're not quite there yet, but you will be there. Like, you know what I mean? Like in a few years, that'll start happening. So we have people that are leaving the BMS industry and going to technology industry. We've got quite a few people that are leaving the BMS to go client side. They're working for a facility manager or they're working for a building owner in their technology or sustainability group. We also have a situation here where some of the tier one mechanical contractors are engaging BMS engineers to help them deliver these projects, to help better manage the BMS contractor.
That's a good move.
So when I was a young person, like 20 years ago, you either worked for the manufacturers or you didn't work for anybody. So nowadays there's just so many options. So it's really hard to retain people because they have options for more money and a much easier job. So in North America, where you say you're having a skill shortage, which you do, that's only going to get worse in time as the technology industry gets more traction. Yeah. Because with Australia, our big key thing was that more than 10 years ago, the government legislated building energy efficiency ratings. So buildings were incentivized to spend money to improve the energy efficiency rating, attract higher profile tenants, and earn higher rents. So in Australia, we don't care too much about the return on investment of like BMS control strategy optimization because we don't care what the return on investment is. We have to get the 5-star rating. The building owner will say to you, I don't care what you do. I don't care what it costs. I have to have a 5-star rating. I want to attract those tenants on that side of the city. And when you have the 5-star rating, you need to retain that. So I think North America is starting to do some legislation around this, but once that gets enforced and gets going, building owners will start to spend money on stuff. And then, things will change. I think you guys still have this thing where I'll give you $20,000, but what's the return on investment? 2 or 3 years, 5 years? We don't have that problem here. We don't discuss that. We have to do something, anything, like pull the facade down, rebuild it. I've got to have the energy efficiency rating. So yeah, we have a massive shortage of engineers, and that's only going to get worse with time. Not just because there's less people coming in, but because technology is creating a different career path for ambitious BMS people.
It's a double whammy, right? There's lots of skilled people retiring, and the people in and young have way more options, right? So it's a double.
Yeah, like there's
problem.
there's big problems there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when we've had guests on before that have, particularly from the commissioning side, Adam, I think you would agree with this, that a lot of them have diversity in their tool belt. Like they have building systems, they have mechanical systems, electrical systems, they have a lot of systems knowledge, which makes them incredibly valuable in the building management system because they understand all of the different components. But a lot of those individuals, they're not exactly, weren't born yesterday. Like these are people that have been through the trenches and have developed, this knowledge over decades of experience. And those people are incredibly valuable. And unfortunately, many of them are, as you said, retiring. Like we see a lot of those people leaving the industry for what, either they're done, like they're retired, or they're just getting out, or they're looking at other opportunities. So we are starting to see that here for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the other sort of side issue is that when we were younger, what happened was you came through the tools. So you were first a commissioning technician or a service technician. You got promoted into like an account manager role or a design engineer role or a project manager. You came through the tools. Nowadays, what happens in Australia is that it's cheaper to get people straight out of university into the office to do design and software programming engineering. So what happens a lot now is that we have people that are doing some design work and are writing software code that never came through the tools. They don't know what a pressure switch actually looks like or a pressure transmitter. They don't know that side. So like, it's not just that we have less people coming in and we have more people leaving, this generational thing. We also are not training people the same way we used to. When I was a young engineer, I was living in London, I'd get in my car, drive to Manchester and spend 5 days in a hospital, so 5 days in a hotel, and on a 5-day in-person training course at a dedicated training center with a dedicated trainer learning how to program one controller, just one controller, 5 days. And while you were there, you weren't just learning how to do PID loops and stuff. The trainer was teaching you like life skills about projects and issues. So you learned other things around the sides of that. Yeah. And like nowadays, that 5-day in-person course is probably a 2-day recorded webinar and a training manual. Read this, you know what I mean? So
wow. Yeah.
We're actually like we're killing ourselves on multiple fronts. We're causing problems. Like it, you know what I mean? Like I have this little idea that this is a long story, but just to touch us for like 2 or 3 minutes. If you think about how, 20, 30 years ago, the BMS contractor, they were the technology provider in buildings. And as more things came into the building, like network connections to chillers and boilers and generators and lighting control systems and fire panels and UPSs, we connected them to the BMS because the BMS was the technology provider. But through 20 years of poor performance, we've been giving things away. Like we messed up energy management systems, gave that to technology, cloud. Messed up building analytics, gave that to cloud. Not doing a great job of energy efficiency, control strategy optimization. Now there's machine learning stuff happening in the cloud. We're about to give that away. Mm-hmm. Because of a very bad job of our network design, as we're adding hundreds of things into the network, BMS companies didn't employ networking engineers to design fit-for-purpose networks. We didn't do that. So now the integrated communications network that we're seeing in buildings has been given to electrical to install because they don't trust us. So we gave away networks. I think that, there's not a bad chance that the last part of that is all this third-party monitoring, the generator, the fire panel, lighting control systems, if the network is by a specialist company and the virtual servers are by a specialist company, why would you connect the third-party monitoring into the BMS? You wouldn't. You'd go straight into that Ethernet network to this integration platform and the data warehouse. Yeah. So if we continue with the path we're on, the BMS will circle back to just being the HVAC controls contractor, chiller staging, boiler staging, temperature control, pressure control, because we're giving things away every 2 or 3 years. So this whole shortage of people is going to impact, it's going to make that worse. So we're getting dumber and dumber and dumber, sorry about I said that, but we're going to circle back to the days of pneumatic controls and standalone controls where the BMS company provides the HVAC control system, network is by somebody else, virtual servers by somebody else, visualization by a specialist company, machine learning, artificial intelligence, fault detection, So all these things are coming to a head. And I think like it's like a crossroads right now that if we don't sort our problems out, we're going to lose the whole thing. Anyway, like.
So there's a lack of R&D there. There's a lack of strategy there, right?
Not well, sort of. Like I think, like over the last 20 years, our BMS products have evolved. Like, better controllers and whatever they are, like better stuff, right? So our hardware is progressing, and you could maybe say our software is progressing as we have. BMS companies can do energy management systems, they can do building analytics, they can do all these things. So the technology in the BMS, which is like different to technology in the cloud, but our BMS technology, hardware and software has progressed, but the way we do things hasn't changed. Like that's savage. We still maintain BMS systems exactly the same way as we did when we had no BMS. Just walking around looking for broken things. Walk up to the AHU. Is the valve working? Yes. Is the actuator working? Yes. Walk next to one. Like, are you serious? There's a server there with graphics on it, alarms, trends, and reports. Go sit there rather. Don't go there. So, and we construct buildings exactly the same way as we constructed them 30 years ago. Like the process of building a building hasn't changed. Everything else has changed. Like, how do you layer on technology? How do you layer technology onto a building, but don't change the way you build the building? Like, anyway. So yeah, I think, Adam, like our BMS technology, hardware and software has evolved. Like we do stuff, right? But just BMS companies haven't changed the way that they do business.
So they're in danger, basically, of becoming extinct or just being degraded. Is what?
Can they become extinct? Yes. Like, wait till like Elon Musk or Google works out that you can save energy in buildings, and you can save energy in buildings, and you can influence peak demand management with the grid and discharging car batteries. Like, once they connect those things together, they're going to come after us. Those clever companies. You know what I mean? Like, the BMS is a gold mine.
Yeah, I had a really interesting meeting last week. I was down in New York, and I'm talking about the new JP Morgan skyscrapers going up there. So Willow, the smart building technology, which is a Microsoft sort of like they're tied in with Microsoft a bit, I think. I could be talking out my arse here, but smart building software platform called Willow, and the building's being designed to have to be a smart building from the get-go, right? So everything's being done in Revit. All the taggings could be done. And then the whole question's coming up of how do we make sure as equipment's bought, the tagging gets updated, the on-site team, with the actual installed data coming back, how does that get in? So this whole thing's being thought out now. But who's going to run that building at the end of the day? Willow, not the BMS contractor.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. But when you told that little story there, that little story you said there, which we've tested that to death in Australia, that exact thing. And the problem is that right now we can't get the BMS installed and commissioned by handover. So how do you build that whole database in the cloud or the visualization? It can't happen. It has to happen after handover. But what happens is the developer says, we'll have all this smart stuff, but I want it done by handover. It's not possible to do that. You know what I mean? We've either got to design and build the BMS differently in a way that's already, you know what I'm saying? Like the issue with technology is that we can try and close those gaps that you spoke about there and solve problems, but unless we build the building differently, it is hard enough getting a sensor on a wall and a valve in a pipe. That's hard enough by handover, right? Like, how do you layer on like $1 million technology platform on top of that?
Well, it's interesting because we've talked to people on the show again about twins, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost like the digital twin should be built before the building. And everything ran through the twin, like all the systems, checks, balances. And then once that's proven to run as imagined by the engineers, then you actually build the actual building.
Yeah, maybe. Well, at least that meets the idea of doing something different, whatever that different thing is, It's almost like I had this idea once was that why don't we change the requirements of practical completion? So at practical completion, here are the new set of rules. The BMS has to be like point-to-point tested, controllers installed, and then that whole technology piece And even BMS tuning and optimization, all that piece gets delivered in another bucket of money in the 12-month warranty period. Everyone's buggered off and the doors are closed and everything's done. Like, like that would be the one way of trying to do it. But, if the deliverable is that the technology is finished at handover, that's not possible.
Oh, I've never seen that in 40 years of work. Right. This is great. The spec asks for it. It never gets delivered that way. So, yeah, I agree with you, because the digital twin is the way it's all going to evolve. But there's still this issue of you start with a design model, right? And it's all tagged up and manufacturer tagging comes in and it goes to a contractor, right? That model gets passed on. Contractor starts populating it with the stuff they buy. The commissioning and testing teams start populating it with what they find. But you still got this data rationalization that has to go on, right? You've got to reconcile the design tagging and data with the purchased equipment with the commissioned systems before you hand that over at the end, right? Or before you hand it over at the end of 12 months defect stability period. The quality of, because what the digital twin and the owner wants is a fully validated as-built situation represented in that digital twin, right? And so what are the inputs to that? The design inputs, the construction and purchasing inputs, and the commissioning inputs, right? And then there's the whole, because once that is set and done, then you can start doing the smart evaluations, the data analytics, and tuning, right? Because the theory is, does a built-in performance have to do that, or can it over time actually improve with the right management? That's the dream, right? This is the Elysium.
I don't know if God could do that. Apologies for any religious people, but like
that's because
if God can't do it, how are we going to do it?
So yeah, I can describe the dream. Delivering it is something else, right?
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you struggling with paperwork, spreadsheet overload, and project management? Then Blue Rhythm is the solution to help you. Streamline your commissioning and project management process. Go paperless. Increase efficiency and save money. Blue Rhythm is commissioning and project management software by practitioners for practitioners, adapting to your workflows and processes and doing things your way. Blue Rhythm provides painless and fast onboarding by bringing your existing workflows, forms, checklists, and issues logs into Blue Rhythm for you. You can use their pre-built templates to customize your commissioning workflows. And Blue Rhythm can fully handle the transition from your current software platform. Blue Rhythm is secure, scalable, and reliable, backed by amazing support, and accessible 24/7 on any Windows, iOS, or Android device. Why are you still using paper and hard-to-control spreadsheets? Start your free Blue Rhythm account today at bluerhythm.com.
And now, back to the show.
There's a whole lot of little roadmap, like little roadblocks that can be fixed. I'll give you a quick example. One of the things that stops the BMS company from having that data ready in time for the technology to integrate to is that when the BMS company is trying to do, for example, develop their control sequences, their control strategy design, they want to develop their control strategy design, and the information that they need from the other trades isn't available yet. So the BMS company says, I want to design this chiller control system, but I don't have the answer to these 5 questions, so I can't move on. So what happens is BMS companies tend to send off a whole bunch of RFIs, then they wait.
Yeah.
And they're waiting. They're waiting for responses to come back. That might never come back, actually, because that other trade doesn't care about the BMS. Like a simple thing to do is, we know what the inputs and outputs are, right? But we don't know what the control strategy is. Not approved yet. The BMS doesn't want to build the thing before it's approved and then redo it again. So just get all your controllers and configure all the inputs and outputs for your controllers, the temperature sensor, CO2 sensor, the valves. Configure the inputs, because we know that quite early. Configure the inputs and then export that database. So you could give the technology company the database thing like 6 months early. And then while you're messing around with the control strategies and workshops and backwards and forwards and this chiller and that chiller, that detail comes later. But you're going to give the technology company like a 6-month head start on pulling all the inputs and outputs and creating some of their visualization stuff and tagging, like you say, mapping, all that can be done. But at the moment now, because the traditional method from 100 years ago was, when you want to know something, you send an RFI contractually and then you wait.
Yeah.
But we can't wait. So like there's different ways to sort of carve this up to help other people move forward while you're messing around with the control strategy, because the technology company might not need those. They don't need the PID loops programmed yet. They just need the inputs, outputs, maybe the set points pre-configured. So there are lots of little ways to do little things that actually don't need much, aren't hard to do.
Yeah.
That will help this. The problem is that the people up here, they don't know about what those problems are, or they know what the problem is, they don't know how to fix it. That's the problem.
Well, that would take a huge amount of not a huge amount, but it would take coordination with the engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, plumbing engineers. Everybody that's specifying those data points has to be involved in putting together that list.
Yeah, but like the other problem I'm seeing, or I saw recently was, when do you guys have this integrated communications network? Yeah, you know what that means? The integrated it's one network for all services, right?
Yeah.
So what used to happen was the BMS company, they were the network provider, right? They were the technology provider. So that BMS engineer knew that to coordinate the protocol type for the chiller and go talk to the lighting control system company, the fire contractor, the generator, electric meters. So the BMS company, even if you don't tell them to do it, they would go and coordinate all those interfaces, all the protocols, cable types, get it all installed. As soon as we went to the integrated communications network and the mechanical specification says an integrated communications network shall be provided by electrical, the BMS company is not providing. As soon as that happened, the BMS company said, okay, I don't have to coordinate any of that. It's not my network. That's correct. But the electrical contractor and the electrical consultant, they don't realize there's a whole bunch of hydraulic panels in basement 3 that need Ethernet cables. They don't realize that those chillers need BACnet MSTP, screen cable, not Cat6, and it's a triple height plant room. But you've got to run a containment down. So there's all these little hiccups where, they don't know that. So the wrong cables go everywhere. I did witnessing a few years ago. I'm sitting to a BMS witnessing, client side. I'm sitting there. I said to the BMS company, show me the hydraulic monitoring. He opens his page up. There's a table, all question marks. I said, why are those points offline? Well, no one told the hydraulic contractor they needed a network. And the hydraulic contractor doesn't even know what protocol means. They don't understand networks and backnets and mapping tables, and they don't know those things. So they don't know that they've got to be proactive to coordinate that. A fire panel person buys a fire panel off the shelf. You ask them what protocol you want, BACnet, MSTP, BACnet, IP, Modbus, RT, oh my gosh, what are you talking about? Kind of a mapping table. What's a mapping table? So a lot of this moving forward with technology, which is positive, good stuff, it's good stuff, but it's creating holes everywhere. They're not being plugged. So if you pull the BMS contractor out of something, they're like,
wow.
So your role sort of evolves into being an integrator, technology integrator almost, right? How do you get?
I guess that's the master system integrator that everyone keeps talking about.
Yeah, that's this magic wizard everyone's trying to find, right? For master systems integrator, read Gandalf the Grey. But
so the one thing I love, let's be positive for a second. Yeah. The one thing I love about the BMS industry is it's 1,000 things to fix everywhere. Like you can provide massive value. Can you imagine if we want to get into the electric vehicle industry? Oh my gosh, we're going to build electric cars better than Tesla and Toyota and Ford. That's a hard industry. Food ordering stuff. We're going to open up a coffee shop. All these industries are so food deliveries, Uber. Those are hard. With us, opportunities endless.
Oh yeah,
we can be heroes. You just look anywhere like this. There's a problem. You have no shortage of opportunity to be heroes, and that's what I love about this industry.
The chance of you being unemployed, Bryce, are less than zero, I would say.
I'm unemployed right now. I'm not earning any money, remember?
But I just want to step back to your time at Norman Disney. So in my mind, now remember, I'm old, right? So I'm an old-fashioned dude. The design engineer is responsible for writing the systems of operation, the sequences of operations, and a points list, right? He designs a system, or she. Just take a VAV system, right?
Not
they design
really,
a VAV system, right? Yeah. It'll have different modes of operation. So there's a sequence of operation to be written for each one of them. It needs to be in a spec, right? There's a points list.
Not really.
And that goes out to bid. Now, the only firm I've ever worked for that did that properly was Arup. They produced a control spec and they wrote a sequence of operation for every system and a points list. And their jobs tended to go a bit better because of that. Do you see that? Is that
Well, first of all, it's just funny you said, even in Australia, I think Arup is one of the few consultants that actually will issue a dedicated BMS specification.
Yeah.
So that whatever you said then in I'm guessing London is similar here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems to unpack there. The first one is that, like, I don't know how your design and construct model works where you live, right? But here the building owner or the developer or the client decides that they're not going to engage the consultant for 100% design. They're going to pay them for 30% of the design and then transfer 70% of the design to the trades to finish off.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the first thing. So when Norman Disney Young or any of these mechanical consultants, let's take one step back. Consultants are also affected by the lowest price wins.
Yes.
So the owner goes into tender for consultants, chooses the lowest price. So over many years, consultancies, just like BMS companies and electrical contractors, have been reducing the fat in their business and their offer to get their price down.
Yeah.
So when that consultancy wins the job, first thing of all is they don't have tons of money in, because it's the nature of tendering, right? So all these things that BMS companies cry about, the lowest price wins, mechanical consultants, they have the same challenge. That's the first problem.
Yeah.
Second problem is they were only designed to do 30% of the design or 50% of the design, whatever it is. So on the schematic, it just shows a box called Chiller 1 because they're not being paid to actually further develop the design of that pipework arrangement. And all that sort of like reduction of available fees is filtering down to less important things like the BMS, because mechanical consultants, BMS is not their strength, of course, right?
Yeah.
So I'm sitting in the office there and I'm watching mechanical engineers, and they're all flat out working themselves to death to get the specification out on Friday. The mechanical specification, the equipment schedules, all the coordination stuff, blah, 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 schematics, chilled hot water, flat out. Do you think they're going to stop and work on the BMS and not get mechanical out the door? They're not going to do that. They've got to get mechanical out the door. They've got to get the schematic done. So consultancies are not doing points lists. They're not really paid to do it. Like,
not on that design and build model.
what annoys me is that BMS companies, and first of all, I'm a BMS person, so I'm on their side actually, right? But like the BMS engineer complains, like the consultant didn't put the VAV temperature sensors on the drawings. They didn't do that. They're not paid to do that. That's your responsibility. Your 70% design is to go and do that design. BMS companies are supposed to be doing a portion of the consultant's job. They're supposed to be doing that. What we're doing is we get this wishy-washy 30% design. It's not the consultant's fault. They were not paid to do it properly. They were paid to do a little piece of it. In fact, I like to use the word mechanical consultants are paid to create an intent, a design intent.
Yeah.
Build beams, VAVs, here's the intent. The trades are supposed to further develop that. But BMS companies are doing their design and building their design completely off the intent, which is not right. There's like 100 hours of stuff missing there in between those two things, right? So anyway, I'm not sure what the original question was, but the mechanical specification is not right. What I do when I'm reviewing BMS designs, sometimes I'm like client side, right? And the independent commissioning agent will engage me to do the BMS design.
Yeah.
I'm silent. I don't sign my name anywhere, so they don't know I'm doing these designs. I get the BMS design and I look at it, and I get the specification by another company. And I look at it. If I see that the points list in the specification is the same as the points list in the BMS design, alarm bells go off. But everyone else think that's great. The mechanical consultant says, I love these BMS guys. They're doing exactly what we asked them to do. However, that's not right. Those 10 hydraulic points, they're not in that panel. It wasn't coordinated. So when design and construct came through, BMS companies should have changed how they, with mechanical, sorry guys, I'm getting all over the place here. With mechanical in Australia, what happens in mechanical is the mechanical consultant puts together the mechanical design intent. 3 chillers and one of them is a low-load chiller. In Australia, mechanical contractors, tier 1 mechanical contractors have their own engineers. In the sales phase, they redo the whole design.
Yeah.
They spend like 100 hours. They redo the design in the tender phase, and mechanical's tender submission says, we're only providing 2 chillers, not 3, and we're not having a low-load chiller. We're having a big buffer tank. because we've worked out that we can reduce the outside air and we can do this and this and this. We don't need those chillers. And the mechanical wins that project on a completely different design and construct. You know what I'm saying, sort of thing?
Right? Less chillers, cheaper
Yeah,
price.
so the mechanical contractor invested a lot of money in their tender phase that they might not even win, right? To come up with a more accurate, more fit for purpose design, a cheaper design that, by the way, the client liked that idea. The client saved some money on that mechanical design. BMS should be doing the same thing. The BMS in the sales phase, they should look at the design intent, produce their own design, and do work in the tender phase and submit this offer and says, we're not doing it like the consultant said, we're doing it like this. It's cheaper, it's using newer technology that the consultant doesn't know about, it's fit for purpose, it meets the Australian standards, the building code. It's not exactly like that. You know, like, I think it's cheeky that a mechanical consultant rejects a BMS contractor's design submission. How do you do that? Your mechanical design was an intent. It wasn't coordinated. It's not actually completely right. It's fit for purpose as an intent. Like if a mechanical consultant had reject my design, I'd be saying, you are not qualified to reject my design. I'm Bryce Anderson. Like and subscribe.
I think you'd have a problem with that. I mean, it makes you wonder, what is the point of the mechanical designer? Why don't
absolutely
firms just vertically integrate and just do a total package?
Well, that's where this 100% design and construct comes along, because there are some jobs that are 100% design and construct, which means that the consultant writes what we call a concept design. It's not a specification, it's a concept design. It's like a report. It's a report. And the trades do the 100% of the design. Okay, now there are still issues with that, but I don't know, like.
So look, I think
Sorry, what was I going to say? Sorry, Adam, you know what we need? Listen here, Adam, like you just process that thought for a second. Let me just throw this in here. What we desperately need are BMS consultants. If we had 2 or 3 BMS specialist consultants in every big city in the world, like that's a big, like when I worked at Norman Disney and Young, this is what my job was, right? Mechanicals flat out doing BMS, mechanical designs, electrical, fire. My job was to spend like 40, 50, 100 hours doing the BMS part of the design. So I'd walk across to electrical. Hey man, what's happening? How many electric meters do you have? They would say, I don't know. They don't count them like that. Like on their electrical schematics is a type 1 schematic. It's a distribution board with load shedding, 2 contactors, 2 meters. Type 2B, type 3, like they have all the drawings that show the meters, but they don't specifically count the meters because they don't need to know that. So I'd go sit down electrical, I'd count up all the electric meters, put them in the specification. I'd go off to downstairs to Jeremy, the fire engineer, listen, the fire panel, right? Where's it going to be? Ground for how many? 2, okay. Let's agree the points. And then I would type in the exact same points list in the mechanical specification. The exact same points list was copied and pasted into electrical, hydraulic, fire, security, lifts. I go to the vertical transport engineer. Hey man, what's happening? Like how many lifts you have? 5. Where are they? Okay, where can I pick up the volt-free contacts? Can it be a network connection? No, it can't. It has to be low level. I write that all up. So I used to just spend like a lot of time coordinating all of that, and the spec would go out like bulletproof. Like I spent like days and days and days writing out the control strategies. Like that's how things happen. Like that's what the BMS industry is crying for. BMS companies are crying for a specification that they can accurately price against. You know, I had a meeting the other day with a mechanical consultant, and they were saying, like, Bryce, what's your view on if we should provide a points list or not? That's what they asked me. I said, you have to provide a points list. And they don't want to provide a points list, because if they do provide a points list and they're tied into that, they make a mistake, they're liable for that, right? I'm saying the risk of not having the points list is 10 times higher than the risk of making a few mistakes. You know, you say, provide a network connection to the generator. That's it. No points list. BMS company integrates, there's 5 points there. We should have 20 or 30 points there. You know, network connection to the chiller, how many points? They build 2 points, we need 10 points. So you've got to have a points list. And the issue is then, because here's another little thing now that I'm just thinking about this. Design and construct, that model works for other trades. Here's the chiller, it's 1,000 kilowatts, it sits there somewhere.
Yeah.
It's probably a 200 millimeter pipe. I don't know. With the BMS, you can't design and construct the BMS. It's got to be 100%. You can't give a 30% points list. You've got to give a 100% points list. You can't write out 30% control strategy. You've got to write out 100% control strategies. It's got to be complete. So this design and construct model that works for mechanical, electrical, and hydraulics, it doesn't work for BMS. BMS design has to be 100%. If you don't ask for a thermal meter, a BTU meter, you don't get one.
Yeah.
If you don't ask for a magnetic flow meter on the chiller, you don't get one.
Right.
So we need, I got this idea I know we're not marketing here, guys, but I got this idea about creating a training course that trains BMS engineers how to have their own business and be an independent consultant like I am. We need that. If we had 1,000 BMS consultants getting injected into the industry worldwide, lots of problems would go away immediately. Not big problems, but some problems would go away immediately.
It's a cost issue, right? Who eats that cost is the issue.
Let me pause there because you just said a very clever thing there.
Yeah.
When I worked at NDY, right, as their BMS consultant, I got the impression after a few years, sorry NDY for talking about you so much in this podcast, I should have asked you first, but I got the impression that I was an overhead to their business. What that means is
100%.
I bet you if we had 10 consultancies and we looked at their cost, their fee proposed, and there was price there for mechanical consulting, electrical consulting, hydraulics, fire security, blah, 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 blah. And we went to the mechanical price, $200,000 consulting fees, $1 million consulting fees, and we expanded that. I don't think we'd find a line item there that says $50,000 allocated to BMS design. I don't think BMS design is costed by consultancies. I am guessing. It's not a fact.
No, I can tell you that with 100% certainty.
So a consultancy is not going to employ a BMS engineer to be a consultant because that's an overhead, a cost off their bottom line. How do they prove that? You know what I mean? It's a problem that.
It
you're right.
Where you work in the market, right? The jobs I worked on with Arup were big infrastructure airport jobs. So they had to be on point, right? But if you're building a mid-tier office, that's a different story, right? On cost and approach.
I think what happened with me was that, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a bit of a hero. Did you guys work that out yet? But when I was working there, South Africans, I don't know if you know them, they're very arrogant. I was going to say, now I completely forgot.
So that's what
arrogant
happens
and
flying your
forgetful.
flag.
Oh, that's what it was. What it was is that I think NDY, what it was is that I was an overhead to their business, perhaps, but their customers really appreciated having a BMS specialist on their projects, doing heavy BMS witnessing, quality inspections. Yeah. I worked at a big hospital once, and I remember I reviewed 100 Siemens BMS technical submissions during the design phase. I reviewed 100 technical submissions. A mechanical consultant could not churn through that many submissions.
No.
I did 9 days of witnessing. It's like a 2-hour drive. Drive down there in the morning, 9 days over about 3 months, signing off the operating theaters, isolation wards, checking everything. So you're right. No one's paying for it. It's an overhead, but the value is that the customers were noticing that. When you're doing BMS upgrades, they knew Bryce is on the job. He's going to be doing a fortnightly progress meeting, asking the BMS questions, asking his company probing questions, right? So, but you've got to be quite a big company to fund that. And that's the problem.
And it probably begins at the level of Norman Disney. That's why I call it a small, big company, right? When you're like Arup or WSP, you can invade countries, you're so big, it's another level, right? They can carry that cost. But what you're talking about there's a cost for having certainty to be operationally ready, right? So if it's a high complex building like a hospital or an airport that has to be operationally ready, the value is easily demonstrated, right?
Yeah, BMS companies always complain. They're always saying we need more commissioning time. When will the building owner insist that we have commissioning? It's a common complaint that. When will somebody else solve our problem? The thing is that at handover, there's 3,000 people coming from those 5 buildings into this building. They've got nowhere to go. They have to move in on Monday. You can't have more time. Yes, we know that you need more time. Yes, the BMS is not operational. It's a mess, but they're coming. You know what I mean? Like the old days, I remember when I was a young commissioning tech, I'd be working away and the builder would be screaming, we need double shifts, we got to finish. I remember thinking, whatever, it takes as long as it takes. I've done this enough times now. This job will finish when it's finished. Those days are over. Nowadays, the job finishes on that day.
Yeah,
whether it's working or not, that's another story. Like there's been jobs where the builder, I worked on a job once as a BMS project manager, the builder got offered $1 million to compress the program. The builder was like, we'll have that. They asked all the trades put in fee proposals to run double shifts, day and night shifts. So we had commissioning techs running day and night shifts. At the end of the job, the builder was, April's fool. I was just joking. I'm not giving you any money. I'm keeping the $1 million. What are you going to do about it? Like, you know what I mean? Like this, I don't know. Now we're going down an ethical issue of the industry, but like, man, like.
Ethics, anyway, don't get me started on that. Let's pull you back. I want you to put your hat on here and look into the future. So I cannot have a meeting with a big client now who doesn't say the word digital twin at me. And in my mind, I'm screaming, I'll just be happy if it worked without that. So how do you see the collision of this digital twin thing's not going away as far as I can tell? So it's going to emerge in some form or the other. How do you see the collision of BMS, digital twin, and project delivery? How do you see that whole thing meshing together and playing out?
I'm not sure that that's a question I want to even talk about. Like
thinking about your business there, right?
Like make no mistake. I'm a supporter of technology. There's no doubt about it. Like we need, like the technology fills gaps that we need to fill, right? Like a simple example is, you know, if a customer comes to you and says, we've got 100 buildings, we want to get energy efficiency, all right, 100 buildings. So we're going to do control strategy optimization. We're going to download smarter control strategies that the chillers stage better. Like there's things to do there. We've been doing that in Australia for a long time.
Yeah.
Have automatic pressure resets. Like, and 100 buildings, and there's like 20 different BMS companies across those buildings. So to try and get 20 different BMS companies that all have different business models, different pricing structure, different experience levels, different motivation to actually do this work, it's like impossible. You know what I mean? To try and coordinate 20 different, it's a very hard job. So there are situations where technology has this bonus of super scalability, where we build this optimization in the cloud, we test it, we push the button, it gets downloaded to 100 buildings, bang. You know, 2 months later, we tweak it slightly, and it goes down, bang. The exact same code, the same concept across all buildings. That's very interesting and exciting. So even as I'm a BMS purist that thinks that the code should be in the BMS controller because the customer owns the controller.
Yeah.
You know, the customer owns that code. They own the IP. There's no subscription service. I think it should be in there. But at the end of the day, there's certain things you can't do at scale with lots of different BMS companies. So I just want to say that I'm a supporter of technology. There's a place for it. But technology is the cherry on top of the cake. It's not the whole cake. Technology is the cherry on top of the cake. And, you know, we're convincing owners that technology is the whole cake. And it's not. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's a piece of the damn puzzle. If you don't take the BMS company on the journey with you, you know, restructure their maintenance contract and have them aligned with the technology company and all working together, unless you do that, you will not have success. I have like this 10% thought in my mind, a 10% thought that technology will fizzle away in building services because we're this legacy dumb industry, building services. And right now, I'm not convinced, and like, you know, I could be wrong. If there are other people here right now that give really good arguments to this, but I just don't see that there's a real return on investment with a lot of this technology stuff. I just don't see what is the real return on investment, the money that I'm paying you $20,000 a year for this application. How much are you saving me $20,000 a year? Like, are you like, you might not be. So, and the thing also with technology companies is that, again, my personal opinion, I'm really like, you know, putting it out there, right? But probably not even right, just food for thought. But so I was so busy explaining why this was food for thought that I lost track of that thought process again. But technology companies, technology companies have a solution to a problem. Like the owner of the technology company saw a gap in the market. that needed a solution, and they built a platform to solve that problem. Tick in the box, we need that thing, high fives.
Yeah.
And they employed software programmers and developers and user experience people and machine learning stuff, but they didn't address the issues with how buildings work, how contractors are engaged. I did a post, I think it was yesterday or this morning, I can't remember. I did a post to say something on LinkedIn. Someone posted, I did a comment that said, technology companies, they tell building owners, if you pay us $20,000 a year, the efficiencies you gain through fault detection, you can offset that against reducing the BMS maintenance cost. So obviously, if BMS service technicians don't have to go and check those things, you can reduce their contract cost. Good luck going to a BMS company and saying, could you give us a 20% discount to pay for technology? No, we're not doing that. Mr. Customer, we have KPIs to earn more revenue, not earn less revenue. So there's a lot of things that the technology companies do, their angle doesn't work. So that was the first one. You cannot go to Honeywell, a big global corporation, and tell them, we're going to reduce your maintenance contract. Sorry, Honeywell, Siemens, Schneider, Johnson, anybody. You can't go to a BMS company and say, we're going to reduce your maintenance contracts. You're going to lose money. You're not going to hit your KPIs. You're going to get fired. That doesn't work. The other one is that technology companies, they think it's funny. Sorry, I'm getting a bit distracted here. Technology companies, they try and make BMS companies look as bad as possible.
Yes.
Look, Mr. Customer, we've ran our technology for 1 hour. We found 100 faults. Those BMS guys, what have they been doing? They're so rubbish. You should engage us on all of your buildings. And then the building owner can't understand why the service technician won't execute the insights that the technology company is spitting out. Right. So for a technology company to be effective, the BMS company has to be on board with you, not fighting against you. Yeah. So for a technology company, while you're building shiny things and solving problems with technology and data, every technology company has to have a strategy for how to deal with the BMS company. And that strategy really should revolve around working together somehow. You know what I mean? So what I'm saying here is this digital twin question is that there's fundamental issues in how things happen with people and companies. Not talking about ones and zeros now. We're talking about businesses. And technology companies haven't addressed that problem. And they're steaming forward. The other thing also is that BMS companies, as I said to you before, are we okay for time still? Because I don't even know if you've asked me the first question you're supposed to ask me. You haven't asked me the first question you're supposed to ask me yet. We haven't even started the podcast yet.
That's totally free range. We're just going to ramble around like three old demented guys.
With the BMS, BMS companies, when they install the BMS in construction phase, they install the absolute bare minimum because it wasn't specified and there's no time and there's no money. Lowest price wins. So when you get a BMS out of a new construction project, it's the most basic thing it can be to get the job over the line with very poor scoping and not much money. So that's the first thing to understand, right? You're not getting anywhere near what this thing could do. So a lot of my angle is that a lot of the stuff that's going into the cloud could easily be provided by the BMS system. We could have highly engaging visualization of graphics. We could do that. Yeah. We just don't do that. If you go to a building that's 20 years old, you go to a 20-year-old BMS building, you look at the graphics, they are very similar to the graphics nowadays. When I do a BMS upgrade, I go to site and I take a photo of every single graphic because a photo is faster than a screen share. So I'll collect about 200-300 photos on my first day of my survey, and I have these graphics from 20 years ago. And then 6 months later, when you're reviewing graphic submissions from BMS company, it's exactly the same thing. There's the 3D AHU, supply fan, return fan, 3 economy dampers, heating, cooling valve, supply temperature, pressure, set points. The graphic looks cleaner. It's a nicer looking graphic. The color palette is nicer and something spin.
Thank God.
But the actual visualization of that data didn't change. We could visualize that data 10 times better. So my view is, let's get the BMS to do the best it can do. You won't believe. I'm telling you, we could do another session on what it can do, right? and then use technology to fill the gaps. That's what we should be doing. We should begin the BMS, because the customer owns the BMS server. The customer owns the BMS application. They own the BMS controllers, the networks, everything. They own everything. Why rebuild all that somewhere else? And the second thing is, the service technicians already coming to site. You're paying them $150,000 a year to come to site for 1 day a week. The technician is coming to site. You're paying them already. Just get them to do high value activities.
Yeah.
Optimization, energy enhancements.
Yeah.
Stop walking around looking for broken things. Like we have the infrastructure in place.
Yeah.
So with digital twin, like, I'm not an expert in digital twins, so I don't want to get too into that. I know what it is sort of conceptually, but I just think that, like, we should be investing in what we have already, and then use that other stuff to sort of improve on it, wrap it all up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
If BMS companies, if we did a meeting, we had, say, 2,000 BMS technicians on a call, right?
Yeah.
And we just started doing some massive coordination. Now, I'm going to exaggerate my point here, and I apologize in advance, but just as a concept, an idea, I reckon if we coordinated all the BMS companies in the world and all their service departments, we would shut down the whole market of technology, or 50% of it. Because most technology companies exist to solve a problem that the BMS company failed at. Energy management systems, building analytics, and visualization. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not being a mean person here. I'm not trying to try to be mean to technology companies. But if you're a technology company and you're listening to this, in my opinion, and I'm being pretty extreme here, right? I'm not being conservative, but if you're a technology company, you need to be aware that the BMS industry could shut down your market if they just tried a little bit.
Yeah. There's a lot of big messages in there, and I think, Adam, you and I have talked about this over the last 5 years or so with regards to technology. But I wanted to take what our past discussions just mention something here, Bryce, is that let's just take thermostats, for example. The manufacturers, and they know who they are, the technology companies that are producing these things, have gone into the market and have promised the world in terms of, we're going to improve your comfort, we're going to reduce your energy, blah, 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 not understanding that the problem isn't the thermostat, that it's the building.
Yes.
Right? And so the BMS companies, you're right. If everybody got together and said, okay, look, we can actually solve these problems because we actually have a more intimate knowledge of the building, thus the word building management system, than the technology companies. You know what I'm saying? And so you're right. And there's a big message in there. There could be a very real threat to the technology companies. On the other hand, if the technology companies are listening, they would start to learn what, in fact, what they should be doing. And technology in itself is not a solution unless it actually solves a problem. And
that's the
most of the problems that we have with building today is, in fact, the building itself.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in quickly? I'm gonna sort of slightly exaggerate something, and this is gonna be a generalization. It doesn't apply to all companies, right? But generally, this is what happens. If the three of us join a BMS company tomorrow, they will train us on their products, how to write software code, how to build database, how to draw graphics, alarms, trends, how to use their tools, how to use their products. They will train us on that. Yeah. Generally, BMS companies are not training their staff on how to design a BMS, how to commission a BMS, how to project manage a BMS, how to service a BMS. Yep. All those soft skills around the product, they're not actually specifically training on that. BMS companies are not training their engineers on how to be optimization specialists, chiller staging specialists. Now, when a service technician rolls into site on Monday morning, they weren't specifically trained on exactly what they should do when they get there. They were taught that if that controller's failed, how to replace the control, the new one, or the new program. And, right. If that point's offline, how to fix that. If the server blows up, how to fix that. They get taught that. But, and that was okay 20, 30 years ago when customers had very low expectations. When I was a service technician in 2002, 2003, 2004, all we cared about was comfort control. Didn't care at all about energy efficiency, what power cost. We didn't have 100 variable speed drives, hundreds of electric meters, integrations to fire panels, generators. We didn't care about energy. Like, it was so firewalls, cybersecurity. Like, the thing is very complicated. And it's like 20 years later, like, product training alone is not enough. You know, we're, you know what I'm saying? Like, these problems aren't getting solved because the project managers, the design engineers, and the service technicians, they don't know they don't know other stuff that's important. I always say, like, BMS companies are not training their staff on advanced topics. Like a project manager knows how to order materials and put together a project program and organize their resources, go to meetings, do meeting minutes. They know how to do that, but they're not taught how to look up ahead 6 months and solve that problem now, because it's going to happen. Like, build the thing differently, design the thing differently, do things differently. Like, they're not trained in doing that generally. As I'm generalizing, like, there are good people out there, but like, there's less of them. So like,
the laws of sorry, go on, mate. Go.
That's what we've actually been talking about for the last 30 minutes, 45 minutes, runs through other veins of the industry. And I'll just give you an example in academia, where you have professors, encouraging their students to do research work. And the research work, and again, this is like yourself, this is a general statement, and it's all good. The research that comes out of the universities is good stuff. But the information that comes out doesn't actually solve the problem. It just explores more of the more detail of the problems that exist.
Yes.
And so I'll give you an example of this in the world of thermal comfort. So I sit on ASHRAE Standard 55, SSPCC, and we are responsible for writing that standard. And part of that is doing research work. And you guys are on LinkedIn, and it's getting more like where there's probably 2 or 3 papers a week that are coming out on thermal comfort. And it's the students and the professors that are diving deep down the rabbit holes, and they're coming up with, some of them are coming up with technology solutions. Like, if you do this, like wearable sensors is going to solve the thermal comfort problem, right? Blah, blah, blah. And I always have to keep bringing them back that, listen, less than 1% of practitioners can actually do a compliance test to Standard 55. You can keep adding all this shit onto the knowledge base, but the problem is that we only have 1% of the people doing it anyway. So the problem is not the knowledge. The problem is to actually get people to actually apply what we know now with what we know, not keep adding stuff to it. And so actually what they're doing is they're making the problem more complex, and less people will actually look at it. They'll go, it's just, too much. I can't deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you sort of touched on this before, sort of, in a way, it's like, if we just got the building to work properly, the way it's designed to work, we'd have half our problems would be solved.
Absolutely.
More than half, if you ask me.
More than half, absolutely. Lighting is solved, sound is solved, indoor air quality is solved, thermal comfort is solved. Basically, all the sensory systems of the human body can be resolved with, like, 80% of the building can take care of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Listen, we're coming up on time. We normally finish with 2 sort of short form questions. So I'll start. So I'm a money whore. Economics amuse me. I've had 40 years in this business, and I realized I should have gone into Wall Street maybe. But anyway, do you think, so what you've just described here is a chronic mismatch in supply and demand. There's a great demand for real skilled, knowledgeable people, and there is a horrendous shortage. So do you see the remuneration, the salaries and the fees for BMS consultants going through the roof?
First of all, I think no, because, like, BMS consultants don't earn as much money, I think, as people think they do. So if you're a BMS engineer and this consultant walks in, wow, this consultant wrote the specification, oh my God, look, that person's amazing. They might earn less than the BMS engineer. So first things first is consultants don't necessarily earn a lot of money.
Right.
You know what I mean? The second thing is, which is not quite your question, but I think that all this net zero stuff and, this idea, like, governments, they sign up to net zero, like it's easy. They just sign up to, they don't know how they're going to do it, like, probably. I'm pretty sure that governments will enforce that responsibility onto industry. So I think that would have happened. I'm just making this up. It's not my area of expertise, but just listening to people talk. I think that these buildings, commercial buildings, will get like a carbon credit. If you go over that carbon, you get penalized.
Yeah.
That's what they'll do probably, something like that. So if you can position yourself, whether you're a consultant or a designer or a contractor, if you can position yourself as an expert that knows how to save energy in buildings, you are going to be a hero that can demand whatever salary you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if this building is going to exceed its carbon credit and they're going to get penalized, and you know how to, from a BMS point of view, for example, you know how to do like advanced control strategy optimization, energy efficiency, and get the most out of the cooling towers and the chillers. And like, I think you could demand whatever you want your salary to be. I have this idea that, you know, like traditionally, like doctors and lawyers, these are the people we look up to, like doctors and lawyers and that sort of stuff. But I think that we are going to be the future of doctor, anybody can be a doctor. What are they doing? Like, we can save energy in buildings. And I have this little story when I do my training courses for the BMS service technicians. I tell them a story about how, you know, like the plan is to build billions of electric cars and solar panels and wind farms.
Right.
What does it cost to build those things and the infrastructure behind it? BMS engineers, they take this thing. It's called a keyboard. You tap on this thing and pumps slow down and fans slow down. You just tap on it like that. I'm not going to do it now, so I'll probably close my window. But we can save energy in buildings with no investment.
Yeah.
The tech's going there already. He's already going there. So like my view is that I'm almost buggered up that. Let me just fix that. I just getting excited there and tapping on the keyboard. I think that that's something anything we want it to be. Anything you want it to be. I also had a video recently about that. I think the way we sort of procure people for projects will change. Did you guys watch that? I'll be very offended.
No, I haven't seen that one yet. I mean, I believe superstars should be bought the same way football players are bought. Then that way you value them and use them well.
Yeah, so the three of us, we're going to upgrade this BMS. We're going to go in as a super team. Yeah. You're a specialist in this, this, and this. You know, we're not procuring the team the same way. In the video, I use this example of putting together a special forces team to do a specific task, and we build these teams. So I think that if we change the way that we procure resources, people, you can earn whatever you want. So the answer, I think, is no, they won't earn more money if they carry on the way that we are, but we can shift the procurement model. Like I reckon if I saw an advert for an engineering manager for a company, I reckon I've got that job if I apply for it. Now, not being this is arrogant brass born in Durban, South Africa, coming through again. But like, who's going to beat me in a job as an engineering manager?
Yeah.
I feel almost embarrassed saying that. My wife will be saying, Bryce, don't say that. She always says to me, I walk out of the meeting, my wife says, Bryce, don't say it. It's embarrassing. You're embarrassing me. Don't say that. Anyway, but I'm going to get that job and I'll go into that interview and say, listen, by the way, this is how much money I want. I'm working from home and I want that car and that cell phone, take it or leave it. And I'll probably get that job. So we can earn anything we want. We're just doing dumb things. You know, if you're a quick one, sorry guys, a quick one. Say you're a software programmer. It's quite a low level sort of job. You're a software programmer. You're not a big fish in the company. But if you're a software programmer, and software programmers, what they do is they just focus on writing code, the best code they can. But if that software programmer starts to think about, hang on a sec, how many hours are allowed in the fee proposal for engineering? Let me manage my time. And if I can prove that I can always deliver the software engineering phase or the design phase in like 10% less time and generate more profit for my company, like I'm gonna get jobs as a software engineer. I go for an interview at some company. Listen here, by the way, guys, the last 10 jobs I did, here's a little spreadsheet. Look at this. These are the last 10 jobs I did. That was the allowed amount of engineering hours. This is how long I spent. I generated this much additional dollars on my projects, which totals, I saved the company $55,000 every year on efficiencies through engineering. You're going to get that job and they're going to pay you for that. Like, you know what I mean? Like individuals are not promoting themselves or thinking about how do I raise my personal brand.
Yeah.
I was a project manager for Johnson Controls in Australia, and I'm not lying. I did 33 projects. I was the project manager and the design engineer, 2 roles. At one point, I'm not joking, I generated an additional $100,000 of pure profit in cash above and beyond all my target margins in the bank. And every month, the branch manager would steal some of it to prop up other jobs. So I go for a job at a BMS company. I said, listen, I'm a project manager. And by the way, I did this. They're going to give me that job. And I'm going to tell them how much money I want for that.
Yeah.
But we don't think like that as staff members. We don't think about,
No, you gotta ask for what your value is, but you gotta be able to back that up, right? That's the key.
Yeah. So Bryce, my question is, let's just say you're like this oracle in space, and somehow you find the wormhole that goes back into time, 50 years in the past. And you show up through the wormhole on your horse with this like golden angel head around you. And there's, the world of building code and engineers and building managers are there. And you've got words of wisdom from the future. And your words.
You told me you're going to ask me that question for a start. I would have loved to have known that question years ago.
What do you tell the past to prevent what happened in the future? Because that's where we are today. What do you tell them?
Look, there's probably a million things, but one of the things that I sometimes think about is, sometimes manufacturers call me and say, Bryce, we can't win a job because, we're too expensive. We can't win a job. And I say to them, you know how that is? Because you're tendering to be specification compliant and no one else is. Yeah. So the first thing I would say to people was that I wish I could think about this more carefully because there's probably much better answers. But if we're a BMS company and there's a tender out there, and there's a few things coming to mind here. And as I said before, you take that intent and you develop your own solution. It annoys me that BMS companies build the wrong thing because it was specified, right? So, you could win jobs by you don't have to be specification compliant, sort of. You know what I mean? Depends on how in Australia, we have a very unique situation. This is going to blow your mind. In Australia, the consultant works for the developer and produces a design that's fit for purpose for the customer. In Australia, when design and construct model, what happens is when they engage the builder, the head contractor, the consultant is novated from the owner to under the builder. So the builder is now the customer of the consultant, not the client. And the builder has different priorities. I've so many times been forced into signing off non-compliance because my customer is now the head contractor, not the client. Lots of times that happens. So the situation, if you're a BMS company, understand the food chain and who makes the decisions. We have the ability to do things differently and sort of massage the outcome, but we don't do that. That's one thing. There was another thing that popped in my mind there a second ago, and I forgot what it was already. I'm also quite old. I wish I remember. It was such a clever thing to say. I was going to be very proud of myself, and I forgot what it was. Anyway, there's a million things. A million.
Yeah. I think one of the things about taking your response to my question about not bidding what was actually specified, looking at what the intent is and building that. But in many ways, and I agree with that actually, but without boundaries around that process, then you end up with this kaleidoscope of solutions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I sort of made that up. But let me give you just a quick thing. When I look at LinkedIn, the photographs that people put on LinkedIn, you can sort of work out what's going on in different parts of the world. In the US, I look at these photographs of control panels, and there's 15, 20 millimeter steel conduits coming in there.
Oh, yeah,
steel conduits.
That's North America.
in Australia, we have a 50 millimeter, 50 by 50 square bit of trunking that comes down the lid, and all the cables are in there. We have plastic conduit on all of our AHUs. I have an opinion that a BMS company in the US could not win a job in Australia.
Not a chance.
And in many situations, it's because the US, you're probably doing it better. It's a better quality of install, but days have moved on. Times have moved on. There's perfect quality and there's sort of fit for purpose. So there's a lot of I have this idea that how the hell does it happen after 30 years that everyone is doing different things? Why aren't we all doing the most optimized thing? Another quick example, not to get too deep into this. In Australia, our VAV boxes, we run a BACnet MSTP screened comms cable to all the VAVs. At the same time, we pull in a 1.5 millimeter daisy chain 24 volts AC power supply. We don't run a main supply with a transformer. We have the 24 volts is daisy chain. I'm pretty sure in the US, could be wrong, you guys run mains power, and there's a little transformer circuit breaker at the VAV box or at the fan corner. Like,
right. And it would be completely separate contractor.
Yeah, and it's great because if one power supply fails, you lose power to one thing.
Yeah.
If you start analyzing the cost to install that versus the risk, you know what I mean? So we have one big transformer in the riser and one 24 volts daisy chain pulled through. There are so many advantages to that because you can temporarily power up that transformer and power up the VAV controllers a month before mains voltage is even approved to be turned on, right?
Yeah.
I look at this, I think like, why are we all not just doing the most optimized thing? And the US engineers say, like, Bryce, that sounds great, but the specification says we've got to do it like this. That's a problem, right? To be solved. But we could solve that problem. But just, I don't understand how, like, we do things so differently. Like,
That's
if I look back in time, I try and coordinate that.
Part of it is a cultural thing. In the US, and this is, you talk about South Africa and the self-patting on the back. Well, Americans are worse. And Canada are the same as Americans, but we're more humble about it. And that is that if it wasn't, so like the combined population of Canada and the United States is less than 5% of the world. But you would, if you were from Canada and the United States, you would never know that. Like, you would think we are in fact the center of the universe. And one of the problems that we have is that we think if it hasn't been invented here, it was never invented.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And as a 5% of the world's population, where we think everything begins and ends here, it's like, help us.
What you're seeing there, Bryce, that's still conduit everywhere. That's a union thing. The only way you're getting rid of that is you've got to knock off Tony Soprano.
There's lots of things that we could be doing different if we would just say, you know what, like, let's just pay attention to what other people in parts of the world are doing and model them. And that's not just and what you've given is one example. There are so many examples like that. Yeah.
Like this, just quickly, I don't want to like start a whole new discussion that it wasn't supposed to start, but like Adam, the union thing, right? So in Australia, the state of Victoria where I live, we have quite a strong union presence compared to other states. It's a bit weird, right? And, we wanted to temporarily power up our control panels to start commissioning things before the plant room was ready. But the union was like, you are not turning that panel on until the plant room's finished. So we're like, okay, well, what about this? What if I take all the mains voltage, 240 volts for us, and I put in a separate box next to the control panel? So here's the control panel. There's only 24 volts AC in here. And in that other box next to it, a meter away is a lock box with the transformers and circuit breakers. Now, will you let me temporarily power up a panel that only has 24 volts AC and there's no mains voltage? And like the union rep would be like, okay, like that could work. You know what I mean? So you sort of work with the union. What do you have to have in place to let us turn the power on? And there's things like, normally, sorry guys, we're sort of going, should be saying this below. Normally we have one big fat control panel in the plant room, maybe next to the mechanical switchboard, and it's a centralized control system. Yeah. So to power up that one panel, you got to power up everything. So they were like, okay, why don't we distribute the control panels? And we put a small panel on every AHU. One small panel, one control. Just distribute the controls from the central panel, distribute them. So now, Mr. Union Rep, I'm only going to power up this AHU. I'll put a barrier around here, and I'm only powering up the 24 volts AC with this UPS. I'm not going to put the mains on. And the union guy's like, I don't like that, but I suppose you can do that. You can do that. So this is the idea where, valid point, the union wants something. No, let's solve that problem. Let's change how we design and install the BMS completely differently to solve the union's problem so we can power up 3 months early.
Would never happen in the US, what you just described. There's more chance the Queen of England coming and cleaning your car than that happening in the US, what you just described.
The thing is that, but when you tell the head contractor that you're going to finish the building 3 months earlier, the other head contractor saying, listen, union rep, I know that you're independent, blah, blah, blah. They're like, I know what you're saying, but I'm telling you now, that might be an extreme difficult example. Yeah. Okay, maybe it is. But that's an example
is the big one, right? Because there's a lot more regulations around it. But yeah, I mean, that's probably a subject of another podcast, electrical commissioning, because that really does differ country to country.
But the point is, we have problems and we've learned to accept them. We're like a robust, resilient industry. We get beaten on the head every job. We just put up with it. Do it again next time. But I'm telling you now, a lot of our issues, big problems, can be solved. We're just not stopping to try and solve them. Anyway,
mate, we better wrap up now. So listen,
thanks, Bryce. Yeah, it was great.
I loved it.
With you. Yeah,
I'm a fan of your YouTube channel, and I'm sure
like and subscribe.
That's in the show notes. And thanks for coming on, man. It's all good.
Right, guys, have a good one. Bye.
The Edifice Complex will continue in just a moment.
Are you passionate about the built environment? Do you want to learn from the industry's most inspiring, intelligent, and accomplished professionals? Then the companion to this podcast, Wisdom of the Property Crowd, is just the book for you. From Edifice Complex podcast interviews, this book distills the critical thinking, insight, and ideas of some of the property industry's most accomplished and respected practitioners. Each chapter is a synopsis of an hour-plus interview, capturing the takeaways and insights, including diagrams and images, to help explain concepts and ideas. There's also a brief bio about the interviewee and a QR code linked to the podcast episode for those that want to explore further. These are the mentors you wish you had in college. Wisdom of the Property Crowd by Adam Muggleton. Available on Amazon worldwide.
And now, back to the show.
Show notes.
Wow.
Show notes. You know that book you had there, like the notepad.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have a copy. Well, you know where it is? It's actually under my computer. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, see that exactly. That's what I was looking for when I wanted to do this show, because I was taking notes the whole time. Bryce, like it's like that. What's the thing where you wind up and then the thing pops out?
You know what Bryce is, right? He is an intellectual BMS engineer.
Yeah, like
right? He's deep.
Yeah,
they're not normally like that, by the way.
Right.
And he actually understands engineering and consulting. That's a rare beast, that skill set.
Yeah, and I love the fact that he had the kahunas enough to, mid-game say, look, at where I need to be is actually teaching BMS companies and stop working on buildings and their BMS systems. That's a bold move. And I hope it works out for him. Like, I really do. I hope he finds that reward that he's looking for, not only in terms of the financial reward, but he's also looking for that hero reward that, you leave something behind.
I mean, where the Australian government, I worked in Australia for a year, and I'm sort of keep in touch with what's going on down there. I just like the place. And the Australian government, how can I describe it, is very assertive with legislation. When they decide they're doing something, there's no like backwards and forwards. It's like, you know what, boys? You're going to start paying carbon tax. You're going to.
It's true.
Right?
It's
so
true.
If they go down that route, I think that would be his angle, as he was alluding to there. If they really, at the moment, they design for compliance, right? So if the compliance becomes like, you know what, it's going to be this efficient, it's going to have this carbon footprint, that's where he will start to win.
Yep, absolutely. Man, we could have a whole discussion about that. Well, that was one of the things when I left Australia that I really appreciate was the fact that they don't pussyfoot around stuff.
No.
Like, then they have zero tolerance for a lot of the social special interest groups that is in other countries. Like,
no. Lobby groups all down there. It's just like, dude, are you in or out? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And there is a lot of benefits to that. But going back to Bryce, the things there was a couple of points he made. One of them has to do with the problem with not winning the projects is you're bidding as per the spec rather than the intent. There's a lot to be said about that. I remember like lots of projects, and I've been on both sides of the coin, right? Where we're supplying stuff and where we're engineering stuff. And I'm glad I went through as a tradesperson first, then got into the business side, then got into the distribution side, then the manufacturing side, and then the engineering side. I'm glad I got to go through that. Because when you're bidding a tender and you're looking at the specification with a critical eye, you're going like, we could do this so much better and for a lot less money and a little bit more, way more optimized. But you can't, because that's what the engineer specified.
That's commercial suicide, what you just described there.
It is,
Yes.
right? And so the whole design intent, like looking at what are you trying to do? And then the whole part about 100% design and construct. So when you take responsibility for designing it and building it, we did that with our business before I sold it to the Danish company and started my engineering company. Is that we did the design build on these substations, these district energy substations, and it was a lot net price. Like if the distribution chain came to us and said, well, we want to know what you're charging for the pump or the pressure gauge, or it was like no. Like we did all the engineering work. We did everything on this project. We put in the time. This is our price. If you don't like it, too bad. Yeah. Right. So the 100% design construct, and for us, like that was magic. We had, when I think about, like, you take the dollar value of a design construct project and the same value in supplying parts only and letting somebody else put it all together. Oh my God, the parasitic losses on our profit. Yeah. When somebody else took the shit and put it together versus us doing it. Yeah. Not even the same business model, like not even in the same business park, right?
I tell you what he said that was really prophetic and just so on point was the technology companies, as he says, they go in, they install, and then they come up with this defects list, and they go, the BMS guys aren't doing you, fire them doing it, right? But what he was right with is the technology companies don't know what they don't know. They don't understand building systems. They don't understand buildings. So it's all very well putting up a punch list. Any asshole can do that. Understanding what that means and why it's that way is the key. And that's what the BMS people have, right? Yeah. And that somehow them two sides have to mush together to make this even work remotely going forward. Yeah. And I don't know how that works, because the reason Elon Musk and Google and Microsoft haven't solved this problem is because they have no clue about building engineering and systems and buildings.
Very true.
And they don't want to, because you can't do that at scale, right? This is the problem. They will only solve billion-dollar problems at scale. This is a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar problem, but it cannot be addressed at scale.
Yeah. He made another statement that I really like, and that is technology is just the cherry. It's not the cake. Yes. And that's a problem with a lot of people. And again, again, for the professors and the students listening to this, like, I gotta tell you, like, you can come up with all of the wearable shit, and you can come up with all the fancy technology and all the different algorithms, and you can just keep writing paper after paper after paper. But if the window to wall ratio is 100% and it's got no solar gain coatings on it and it's facing south or southwest, there ain't no technology in the world is going to prevent that overheating. No. I don't care if you're Nest. I don't care if you're Johnson, if you're Honeywell, if you're the next control manufacturer that's coming in from Saturn. I don't give a rat's ass. The problem is not the controls. It's not the technology. It's the freaking building.
It's the build, and therein lies the problem, right? Because that's where the corners are all cut. The designs are half baked. This is where I still have some hope for modular homes, but done at a high end. They don't have to be horrible, right? They can still be mass produced and be high end and delivered, almost working, right? Either you put them down a pad, power them up, water them up, boom, done, right? Yeah. And how much technology do you need in them? You can have as much or as little as you want, right?
Well, if you think about it, one of the reasons why technology has sort of been allowed to be fertilized within the building industry is because we've failed to fix the problems. Yes. So people are going, well, if the building industry isn't going to fix the architecture, like if architects aren't going to fix the architecture and the clients aren't going to tell the architects to fix the architecture, then we have to come up with a solution. So the solution, the only thing that we have is technology, because it seems to fix other shit.
Well, technology, that's a dangerous. Technology is just more cowbell.
It's exactly.
Ding, 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 ding. I'm going to play the shit out of this cowbell.
That's exactly right. So,
yeah, we should probably wrap it up there. That's a mic drop. The cowbell just.
It is. That was perfect. A cowbell moment.
You've been listening to the Edifice Complex podcast with Adam Muggleton and Robert Bean. To access show notes for this episode, visit edificecomplexpodcast.com. If you have enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes. See you next time.